Friday, August 21st, 2026. Welcome back. And today we are tracking a genuinely dangerous, multi-layered weather emergency unfolding right now across the United States. One that is stacking three separate hazards on top of each other at the exact same time: extreme, life-threatening heat, severe thunderstorms capable of producing damaging winds and large hail, and dust storms so intense that meteorologists have had to invent an entirely new scientific scale just to categorize them. Roughly 60 million Americans are currently under some form of heat alert as this video goes live, with temperatures in parts of the desert Southwest pushing toward 118 degrees Fahrenheit. At the same time, a separate severe weather threat is bringing the risk of damaging thunderstorm winds, large hail, and even isolated tornadoes to a wide swath of the country, while parts of Arizona continue dealing with the aftermath of some of the most intense dust storms the region has recorded in more than a decade and a half. This is not three unrelated stories happening to occur in the same week. This is one interconnected weather pattern driven by the same underlying atmospheric setup, hitting different parts of the country in different ways simultaneously. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly where the heat is worst, why it's reaching the specific numbers it's reaching, what is actually happening with these historic dust storms in Phoenix, where the severe storm threat is concentrated, how this entire pattern connects back to a summer that has already produced some of the most widespread heat events in years, and what you actually need to do if you live anywhere in the path of any of this. Let's start with the heat itself, because it is the anchor driving almost everything else in this pattern. This week, a strong area of high pressure has parked itself directly over the desert Southwest, and that kind of high pressure system works exactly like a lid on a pot. It traps warm air underneath it, prevents clouds from forming, and allows temperatures to climb day after day without the kind of relief that a passing weather system might otherwise provide. The National Weather Service office in Phoenix has explicitly described conditions this week as abnormally hot, with temperatures running 5 to 7 degrees above average, and a major heat risk designation covering much of the lower deserts. An extreme heat warning, the most serious heat classification the National Weather Service issues, has been in effect through the weekend for the lower deserts of Arizona and southeastern California, along with the San Carlos area of southern Gila County. In practical terms, that means daytime highs pushing into the range of 107 to 118 degrees across a huge stretch of the region, including areas around Yuma County, La Paz County, the Colorado River Valley, and communities like Gila Bend, Wickenburg, Casa Grande, and Apache Junction. Further north, the National Weather Service has also warned of temperatures ranging from 107 to 113 degrees across parts of northern Gila and Yavapai counties, while even the lower elevations of the Grand Canyon, an area many people mistakenly assume stays cool year-round because of its elevation and canyon shading, could see temperatures range from 110 to 114 degrees at Phantom Ranch, deep inside the canyon itself. In southeastern Arizona, cities including Tucson, Sierra Vista, Nogales, and Safford are expected to see highs ranging from 101 to 112 degrees. And it isn't just Arizona. Large parts of California are also under extreme heat alerts, with the most intense conditions expected in Imperial County, where highs between 107 and 119 degrees have been forecast to last through the early part of next week. Nearby areas, including the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs, Indio, and parts of the San Diego County desert communities, could see temperatures reach as high as 115 degrees. Later in the forecast window, the same broad ridge of high pressure is expected to shift its influence, bringing the possibility of extreme heat to parts of northwest California, western Oregon, and southwest Washington as well, regions that don't typically associate themselves with this kind of desert-level heat. Places stretching from Eureka, California, up through Portland, Oregon, may see high temperatures push into the 100s, with overnight low temperatures only dropping into the 60s. An important detail because it means residents in these areas get very little overnight relief from the heat, which is itself one of the most dangerous aspects of a sustained heat event. When nighttime temperatures fail to drop enough to let the body and the built environment properly cool down, heat stress accumulates day after day rather than resetting each night, which is precisely why prolonged heat waves become measurably more dangerous the longer they persist, even if the daytime peak temperature doesn't change much from one day to the next. To put a number like 118 degrees into real, tangible perspective, understand that Phoenix has already broken its own August heat record this month. Earlier in August, Phoenix hit 118 degrees, a reading that was not only the hottest temperature recorded in the city for the entire month of August, it tied for the 9th hottest day recorded anywhere in Phoenix's history since record-keeping began all the way back in 1895. That is more than 130 years of temperature records, and this single day in early August ranks among the top 10 hottest ever measured in that entire span. Heat at this level is not simply an uncomfortable inconvenience. It is a genuine public health emergency, and it needs to be understood as one. Extreme heat is consistently one of the deadliest weather hazards in the United States, killing more people in an average year than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods combined, precisely because its dangers are often underestimated by people who assume that heat, unlike a tornado or a flash flood, isn't something that can seriously hurt or kill them. Heat-related illness can escalate quickly, moving from heat exhaustion, marked by heavy sweating, weakness, dizziness, and nausea, to full heat stroke, a life-threatening condition in which the body's core temperature rises to dangerous levels and its internal cooling systems begin to fail entirely, sometimes within a very short window of time. Children, older adults, outdoor workers, athletes, and anyone without reliable access to air conditioning face the highest risk, and even healthy young adults can be seriously affected if they underestimate how quickly conditions like these can turn dangerous, particularly during sustained physical activity outdoors or in poorly ventilated indoor spaces without cooling. Now, let's talk about the second major hazard layered into this pattern, the dust storms that have been making genuinely historic headlines out of Phoenix this month. This is not simply routine desert weather. In fact, meteorologists have had to develop an entirely new way of measuring and categorizing exactly how extreme these storms have become. On the night of August 4th, 2026, a massive dust storm known regionally as a Haboob rolled through the Phoenix metropolitan area and earned the rarest possible rating on a scientific scale that barely existed before this year, a Category 5 on what's called the PHX-DUST Scale, formerly the Phoenix Dust Storm Scale. Think of this the way you'd think about the Saffir-Simpson scale used for hurricanes or the enhanced Fujita scale used for tornadoes. Except this one was built specifically to measure the intensity of desert dust storms, using a network of 22 sensors positioned across the Phoenix area. The scale itself was developed by a 22-author research team led by Arizona State University's School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning, and it was published in the peer-reviewed Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society back in January of this year, meaning this entire framework for measuring Haboob intensity is brand new, developed specifically because scientists recognized that existing tools weren't adequately capturing just how dangerous these desert dust storms had become. During the August 4th storm, air pollution surged to more than 14 times above normal levels, with one sensor recording a reading topping 700 micrograms of particulate matter per cubic meter of air, an extraordinarily hazardous concentration by any air quality standard. And in a genuinely unsettling detail, much of that intensity wasn't reflected on ordinary air quality apps people check on their phones, many of which continued telling residents that conditions were essentially fine, even as the actual air around them had become dangerously polluted with wind-blown dust and debris. This wasn't a one-off event either. Just days later, Phoenix was hit by a second Category 5 Haboob within the same week, meaning the city experienced two of the rarest, most intense dust storms on record within a matter of days of each other. According to Dr. Ryan Heintzman, one of the scale's principal architects and an assistant teaching professor at Arizona State University's School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning, these two storms were only the fifth and sixth events to ever reach Category 5 status across 15 to 16 years of monitoring in the Phoenix area. Both storms carried wind speeds of approximately 50 miles per hour, along with extremely high concentrations of airborne dust, and both reduced visibility down to roughly half a mile at points during the height of the storm. Fortunately, both of these particular events struck during the overnight hours, when road traffic was lighter than it would have been during the day, which almost certainly helped limit the number of serious incidents connected to the reduced visibility. National Weather Service meteorologist Matt Salerno in Phoenix has specifically pointed to that timing as a stroke of luck, noting that had these same storms rolled through during peak daytime traffic, the outcome could have been considerably more dangerous on the region's highways. Dr. Heintzman has noted that Phoenix typically experiences somewhere between 5 and 15 haboobs in a given year, and as of this point in the season, the city is already sitting at around 8, with some of those storms proving notably larger and more intense than what the region has typically experienced in recent years. When asked about the trend, he expressed a mix of scientific interest and genuine concern, noting that this year's storms have been bigger, while also expressing hope that the remainder of the season brings more rain and less dust than what the region has already experienced. To understand why these storms happen at all, it helps to understand the basic mechanics of a haboob. These dust storms occur throughout the Southwest when powerful downdrafts from thunderstorms slam into the ground and spread outward. And in doing so, they pick up and carry enormous quantities of loose dust and dry soil that get pushed forward ahead of the approaching storm cell itself. The result can be a towering, advancing wall of dust and debris, sometimes rising thousands of feet into the sky, that engulfs entire cities in a matter of minutes, dramatically cutting visibility, grounding flights, knocking out electrical power, and creating serious respiratory hazards for anyone caught outside without protection. This is precisely the mechanism behind Arizona's monsoon season, a period running roughly from June through September when increased atmospheric moisture streaming up from the Gulf of California and the Gulf of Mexico fuels intense afternoon and evening thunderstorm development across the desert southwest. That same moisture surge has continued into this week, with meteorologists noting a fresh push of moisture out of the Gulf of California into southwestern and central Arizona, driving an uptick in thunderstorm activity statewide. As recently as this week, the National Weather Service issued a blowing dust advisory covering the Buckeye and Avondale areas, South Mountain and Ahwatukee, and the Southeast Valley near Queen Creek, as a fresh wall of dust and strong winds moved through the Phoenix area, knocking out power to tens of thousands of customers across Maricopa and Pinal counties, and downing trees and debris across local roadways in communities like Gilbert, where police specifically warned that driving conditions had become unsafe. This is genuinely worth sitting with for a moment, because it captures the layered nature of what's actually happening across the Southwest right now. The same atmospheric setup producing life-threatening, record-challenging heat during the day is also fueling the monsoon thunderstorms that generate these historic dust storms in the evenings, meaning residents across Arizona are being asked to navigate both extremes within the same 24-hour period. Dangerous, potentially deadly daytime heat, followed by the real possibility of a sudden, visibility-collapsing dust storm and severe thunderstorm activity once the sun goes down and the atmosphere destabilizes. Now let's shift to the third major piece of this pattern, the broader, severe weather threat extending well beyond just Arizona and the desert southwest. Across a much wider stretch of the country, forecasters have been tracking the potential for damaging thunderstorm winds, large hail, and in some cases, isolated tornadoes, particularly across sections of the Central Plains, the Midwest, and areas extending toward the Mid-Atlantic. This kind of severe weather setup, in terms of scale, isn't unusual for this stretch of the country during summer, and setups like this have previously affected as many as 60 million people across a roughly 800-mile corridor, stretching from central Montana all the way to the mid-Atlantic coast, capable of producing damaging wind gusts and very large hail in major population centers along that path, including cities like Omaha, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. In some of these severe weather episodes, thunderstorm wind gusts have reached 60 to 80 miles per hour across parts of Nebraska and southeastern South Dakota, strong enough to snap tree limbs, down power lines, and cause structural damage to poorly secured buildings and outdoor structures. Flash flooding has also been a persistent and serious secondary concern in these setups, particularly in areas where multiple rounds of thunderstorms train repeatedly over the same communities, dropping rainfall rates as high as 2 to 3 inches per hour and rapidly overwhelming urban drainage systems, a hazard that has specifically threatened densely populated areas like northeastern Illinois and the greater Chicago region during past episodes of this pattern. What ties the severe storm threat directly back to the extreme heat is something meteorologists refer to as instability, essentially the amount of energy available in the atmosphere to fuel thunderstorm development. High heat combined with high humidity creates exactly the kind of energy-rich atmospheric environment that allows thunderstorms to grow explosively once they get triggered, whether by a passing weather disturbance, a front, or simply the natural daytime heating cycle interacting with terrain. This is precisely why forecasters have explicitly linked the heat and humidity currently baking the Central Plains, Midwest, and South to the fuel supply feeding these severe thunderstorm outbreaks. The heat doesn't just sit there passively while separate storms happen to develop elsewhere. It actively charges the atmosphere with the energy that then gets released explosively once storms fire, producing the kind of damaging wind, large hail, and locally intense rainfall rates that define a significant severe weather event. Meanwhile, across the South, more than 70 million people have found themselves under heat alerts of their own in recent days, with feels-like temperatures pushing past 100 degrees and heat indices reaching as high as 115 degrees in some spots. A heat dome originally anchored over the Southwest has expanded eastward into the southeast coast, and combined with high humidity, has kept heat indices near or above 100 degrees across a wide stretch of the region. Charleston, South Carolina, has been forecast to reach 100 degrees with a feels-like temperature of 112, while triple-digit heat has extended west across parts of Oklahoma, North Texas, and the Texas Gulf Coast. Afternoon storms in these areas provide little lasting relief, since they tend to add humidity back into the atmosphere without meaningfully lowering the underlying heat, allowing conditions to build and compound day after day, with nighttime low temperatures remaining stubbornly in the upper 70s. Again, denying residents the kind of overnight cool down that would normally offer some measure of relief and recovery. It's also worth understanding just how widespread this year's heat pattern has been across the entire country, because the current southwest heat wave and dust storm activity is not an isolated summer event. It's part of a broader, well-documented pattern of extreme heat that has repeatedly affected extraordinarily large portions of the U.S. population throughout the summer of 2026. Earlier in the season, more than 100 million people across the nation found themselves under some form of heat alert simultaneously, with cities including Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Rapid City, South Dakota, all forecast to reach or exceed the 100-degree mark, alongside excessive heat warnings covering major population centers like Minneapolis, Memphis, Omaha, and St. Louis. At another point this summer, close to 140 million Americans found themselves under active heat advisories at the same time, as a dangerous heat wave scorched the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic in addition to the ongoing heat gripping the Southwest and Midwest. New York City broke a daily heat record at LaGuardia Airport, hitting 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while Tampa, Florida, a city typically cooled somewhat by consistent sea breezes, hit a record high of 100 degrees as well. This summer has featured what meteorologists have described as multiple distinct heat dome events, essentially separate rounds of this same kind of trapped, high-pressure-driven extreme heat pattern, recurring again and again across different weeks of the season, at one point threatening as many as 70 million people simultaneously in what was described at the time as the third heat dome event of a single month. Severe thunderstorms breaking up one of these earlier heat domes in early July resulted in more than 3 million power outages and 4 confirmed fatalities, along with what may have been the largest hailstone ever recorded in the state of Connecticut's history, a genuinely remarkable and dangerous outcome from a single severe weather episode. Even Tropical Storm Bertha added to the chaos this summer, contributing to what one local outlet described as an unprecedented overlap of weather warnings across southern Louisiana, layering tropical storm impacts directly on top of an already active and dangerous summer weather pattern. This recurring pattern of stacked heat domes, punctuated by episodes of severe thunderstorm activity capable of producing extreme hail, damaging winds, and even flash flooding, reflects an atmospheric pattern that meteorologists had actually connected to the broader seasonal forecast issued before summer even began. That seasonal outlook, published by AccuWeather, specifically called for a volatile mix of heat, severe thunderstorms, and flooding across the United States this year, driven in part by the influence of a developing El Niño pattern in the Pacific Ocean, which forecasters projected could strengthen further as the year progressed and potentially evolve into what's described as a rare Super El Niño event later in 2026, carrying the potential for significant impacts on weather patterns across the United States into the final months of this year and the beginning of next year. In other words, the extreme heat, the repeated dust storm activity in Phoenix, and the ongoing severe thunderstorm threat spreading across the central and eastern United States this week are not a surprising departure from what was expected this summer. They are, in many respects, exactly the kind of volatile, high-energy weather pattern that forecasters warned was likely months in advance, now playing out in real time across multiple regions simultaneously. So let's bring this all together into the complete picture of what's actually unfolding across the country right now. In the desert Southwest, an extreme heat warning remains in effect through the weekend across the lower deserts of Arizona and southeastern California, with temperatures likely to reach as high as 118 to 119 degrees in the hardest hit areas around Imperial County, California, and parts of central and western Arizona. That same heat is continuing to fuel Arizona's active monsoon season, which has already produced 2 rare Category 5 haboobs in Phoenix within the span of a single week earlier this month, along with continued blowing dust advisories and localized power outages as additional storms move through the region on an ongoing basis. Meanwhile, across a much broader swath of the central and eastern United States, the combination of heat and humidity continues to fuel the potential for severe thunderstorms capable of producing damaging winds, large hail, and isolated tornadoes, with flash flooding remaining a persistent secondary concern in areas where storms repeatedly train over the same communities. And layered underneath all of it is a summer-long pattern of recurring heat dome events that has, at various points, placed anywhere from 60 million to nearly 140 million Americans under some form of heat alert simultaneously, making this one of the more sustained and geographically widespread stretches of extreme summer weather the country has experienced in recent memory. So what should you actually do if you live anywhere in the path of any part of this pattern? Let's start with the heat, because it remains the most immediately dangerous and the most consistently underestimated of these 3 hazards. If you are in an area under an extreme heat warning or heat advisory, limit outdoor activity as much as possible during the hottest parts of the day, generally late morning through early evening, and reschedule any strenuous outdoor work or exercise to the early morning hours or after sunset, whenever that's genuinely feasible. Stay hydrated consistently throughout the day, rather than waiting until you feel thirsty, since thirst is already a lagging indicator that your body has started losing more fluid than it's taking in. Seek out air-conditioned spaces whenever possible, And if you don't have reliable air conditioning at home, identify a cooling center, a library, a shopping mall, or another public air-conditioned space in your area ahead of time, rather than waiting until conditions become dangerous to figure out where to go. Never leave children or pets in a parked vehicle, even briefly, since vehicle interior temperatures can climb to lethal levels within just a matter of minutes under conditions like these. And check in regularly on elderly neighbors, relatives, or anyone you know who may lack reliable air conditioning or who may be less able to recognize the early warning signs of heat-related illness in themselves, since heat stroke can progress rapidly and confusion is itself frequently one of its earliest symptoms, meaning the person most affected may not recognize what's happening to them. If you're in an area facing the dust storm threat specifically, particularly across Arizona and the broader desert Southwest, take blowing dust advisories and dust storm warnings seriously, rather than assuming you can simply push through reduced visibility on the road. If you're driving and a dust storm approaches, the standard and genuinely life-saving guidance is to pull as far off the roadway as safely possible. Turn off your headlights and taillights so other drivers don't mistake your vehicle for a moving car ahead of them in the dust, and keep your foot off the brake pedal for the same reason, since illuminated brake lights can actually draw other confused drivers directly toward your stopped vehicle in low visibility conditions. Stay inside your vehicle with your seatbelt on until the dust is passed and visibility improves. And if you have respiratory conditions like asthma or COPD, or you're simply sensitive to poor air quality, stay indoors during and immediately after a significant dust storm event, since particulate concentrations can remain elevated well after the visible wall of dust has moved through. Exactly as we saw with the dust that lingered over Phoenix well into the following day after the August 4th Category 5 storm. And if you're in the path of the broader, severe thunderstorm threat, stay tuned to local weather alerts throughout the day, since these storms can develop and intensify rapidly, sometimes with only minutes of advance warning before conditions turn genuinely dangerous. Have a plan in place for where you'll shelter if a tornado warning is issued for your specific area, ideally a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building, away from windows. Secure or bring in loose outdoor items that could become dangerous projectiles in high winds. And if you're driving when a severe storm develops nearby, understand that large hail and damaging straight-line winds can be just as dangerous to a moving vehicle as a tornado itself. So pulling over safely and waiting out the worst of a storm is often the smarter, safer choice rather than trying to outrun it. If flash flood warnings are issued for your area, remember that it takes surprisingly little moving water, sometimes as little as 6 inches, to sweep a person off their feet, and roughly a foot of moving water can carry away most vehicles, so never attempt to drive or walk through a flooded roadway, no matter how familiar the route may seem. None of this is about causing panic over a summer weather pattern. Extreme heat, monsoon thunderstorms, and severe weather outbreaks are a genuinely normal part of the American summer, particularly across the Southwest and the Central Plains. But normal does not mean harmless. In this particular stretch of weather, with temperatures pushing toward 118 degrees, a genuinely historic run of Category 5 dust storms in Phoenix, and a broad severe thunderstorm threat capable of producing damaging winds and large hail across a wide corridor of the country represents a level of combined risk that deserves real, practical attention rather than a passing glance at a weather app icon. Taking heat seriously, understanding what to do if a wall of dust suddenly appears on the horizon, and having a plan for severe thunderstorm activity are not dramatic, alarmist measures. They are the same basic, sensible precautions that meteorologists and emergency management officials recommend every single summer, and this week, across large parts of the country, they genuinely matter. If breakdowns like this, ones that actually connect the heat, the storms, and the dust into the single interconnected weather pattern they really are useful to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Because staying ahead of these kinds of overlapping weather threats is exactly the kind of information worth having before conditions turn dangerous rather than after. Drop a comment and let us know what conditions look like where you are right now, especially if you're in Arizona, California, or anywhere across the plains and Midwest dealing with this pattern directly, because real, on-the-ground reports genuinely add value to a story like this one. And if you know anyone in the path of this heat, these storms, or these dust storms, share this with them, because a few minutes of preparation, knowing where the nearest cooling center is, knowing what to do if a haboob rolls in while you're driving, having a plan for a severe thunderstorm warning, can make a genuine, measurable difference in how safely someone gets through a week like this one. 60 million people are under heat alerts right now. Historic dust storms have already rolled through Phoenix twice this month, and a broad severe weather threat continues to track across a wide stretch of the country. That is the reality of this week's weather, and it is a reality worth taking seriously. Stay cool, stay alert, and stay with us as we continue tracking this story in the days ahead.